galaxy of human civilizations. Every civilization is like a unique star, shining its own light. The Chinese civilization has been shining since ancient times, and the pre-Qing period is like the starting point of this light. It's like a towering mountain, carrying the very first sparks of civilization for the Chinese nation. At the top of this mountain, the Shang Dynasty, the first dynasty in Chinese history, shines brightly. It's not just the beginning of a historical chapter. It's also the cradle where the Chinese nation's earliest memories and dreams began to take shape. Let's go back to those ancient days when everything was just beginning, like the world was waking up from a deep sleep. The universe was like a mysterious giant, so deep and unknowable, almost like it had its own secrets. Stars twinkled across the vast sky like the giant's beating pulse, as if they were whispering endless mysteries to anyone who'd listen. In this huge, endless universe, Earth was like a tiny but precious gem, slowly spinning along its own path. The blue oceans and green lands mixed together, creating a world full of life and energy, like a vibrant puzzle just waiting to be explored. Over in the east of the Asian continent, the Yellow River is like a dragon that's broken free from its chains, roaring in from far-off times and places. It carries along yellow soil, rushing on without stopping, and with its muddy, churning waters, it's drawn out vast alluvial plains across the land. This right here is the cradle where Chinese civilization was born, and the Yellow River, it's totally earned its title as the mother river of the Chinese nation. She's seen countless ups and downs, triumphs and struggles, and she carries the hopes and dreams of Chinese people through generation after generation. As time slowly ticks by, let's focus our eyes on a Shang Dynasty village along the Yellow River. Everything here feels like a work of art carefully crafted by history. The most distinctive feature of these Shang villages are the rammed earth buildings. With sweat and wisdom, the craftsmen shoveled and tamped yellow earth layer by layer, building thick, sturdy walls. Each layer of rammed earth is like a page from a historical book, recording the vicissitudes of time. Each brick and stone carries the joys and sorrows of daily life. These buildings didn't just shelter people from wind and rain, they were the foundation of social stability. The layers of thatched grass on the rooftops sway gently in the wind, bringing warmth and peace to those inside. Just outside the village, the farmland was the lifeblood of the Shang people. Straight field ridges ran like latitude and longitude lines across the earth, dividing the land into neat squares. Farmers worked tirelessly in the fields, clutching simple stone shovels and bone hoes. They bent over, pushing their tools deep into the soil. Every turn of the earth was a heartfelt conversation with the land. Every seed sown was a hopeful promise for the future. Millet, a drought-resistant and adaptable crop, thrived in this soil. It didn't just feed generation after generation of Shang people, it also witnessed the entire journey of agricultural civilization, from its tender beginnings to its vigorous bloom. The tribal square was the heart and soul of any Shang Dynasty village. Here, pottery told the story of civilization in its simple yet unique way. The geometric patterns on the pottery might look simple at first glance, but they actually held the Shang people's deep understanding of nature's laws. The sturdiness of triangles, the completeness of circles, the strength of straight lines. These combinations of lines were how they understood and expressed the world around them. And then there were the mysterious totems, whether they were soaring birds, running beasts, or abstract symbols. All of them carried the people's reverence for nature's power and veneration for their ancestors. These pottery pieces weren't just everyday items. They were vital carriers of cultural heritage, passing down stories from one generation to the next. In the center of the square stood a tall and imposing totem pole. Its carvings of dragon-like mythical creatures so lifelike they seemed almost ready to spring to life. As the spiritual symbol of the Chinese nation, the dragon held supreme status in the hearts of the Xia people. It represented divinity, power, and authority. Legend has it that during important sacrificial rituals, tribal leaders would stand beneath the totem pole, praying to the gods for good weather and bountiful harvests. Gathered around the totem pole, elders would share tales of their ancestors' bravery. Passed down by word of mouth, these stories were more than just legends. They were the thread that kept history alive and preserved the roots of their culture. In the bronze workshop, flames roared and heat waves rolled. Craftsmen huddled by the blazing furnaces, focused and skillful in their movements. They fed bronze ore into the furnaces, watching it melt into glowing red copper liquid, then carefully pour the molten metal into molds. Every animal face motif etched into the bronzeware was mysterious and imposing, each line a testament to the craftsman's countless nights and days of labor. These bronze artifacts weren't just practical tools, they were badges of power and status. Owning a piece of this intricate bronzeware was a way to flaunt one's rank and a source of pride for the entire tribe. Over on the tribal grounds, young people were in the thick of intense tactical drills. They gripped bronze spears, their shields painted with the tribe's unique designs. Their synchronized steps and thunderous battle cries echoed above the village. This training wasn't just about defending home, it was about keeping the tribe's spirit of courage and unity alive. These young folks were the tribe's future, shouldering the weight of protecting their civilization and expanding their territory. Today, let's take a trip through the river of time to this ancient land, exploring the origins of Chinese civilization and unveiling the mysteries behind the founding of the Shang Dynasty. From the vastness of the universe to the vitality of Earth, from the roaring currents of the Yellow River to the bustling prosperity of Shang Dynasty villages, every scene tells a captivating story, and every detail reveals the unique charm of Chinese civilization. Let's approach this with a deep sense of awe, experiencing the wisdom and courage of the Xia people, soaking in the profound depth of the Chinese nation's long history, and searching for the roots of our culture in history's current, so we can draw strength to move forward on our journey. Way back in ancient times, the Yellow River coiled across the Chinese land like a mysterious dragon. With its sweet milk, it nourished the fertile lands along its banks, giving birth to the brilliant Chinese civilization and witnessing countless tribes thriving, fading, and rising again. But when monsoons swept in from afar with torrential rains, the millennium-old snow on the towering upstream mountains would melt rapidly, merging with the rains into an unstoppable torrent. That's when this gentle mother river would transform into a fearsome god of disaster, unleashing endless suffering upon the world with overwhelming force. According to the Book of Documents, Yao's canon, it says, huge floods were tearing across the land, swirling around mountains and swallowing hills, towering high as the sky. Back in the days of Yao and Shun, a never-ending flood disaster hit like the apocalypse, sweeping across the entire central plains. This flood was like nothing anyone had ever seen. The rushing waters were like a huge, raging ocean that drowned the entire landscape. Even the tallest mountains and rolling hills looked like tiny islands bobbing on the water, barely hanging on. What used to be fertile fields turned into a giant swamp. Crops got completely washed away, no harvest at all, and all the plants, soaked for so long, grew like wild, turning the area into a paradise for wild animals. Suddenly, beasts like wolves, tigers, and leopards started multiplying like crazy. They formed packs and charged into villages, putting people's lives in serious danger. Faced with this once-in-a-lifetime catastrophe, the ancient Chinese people found themselves in a nightmare they never imagined. The population dropped sharply, Once bustling villages turned into ghost towns, all broken down and empty. The fields that used to be neatly crisscrossed with paths were now just huge patches of murky water. The only footprints left on the land were messy tracks from wild animals. To survive the floods and beasts, folks had to abandon the homes their families had lived in for generations. Some climbed high into the trees, tying vines and branches together to make shaky little nests. They were so jumpy, like birds spooked by every noise, hardly sleeping day or night. Others hid out in mountain caves, shivering in the damp darkness, starving and scared out of their minds all at once. The once thriving tribal alliances fell into a deep pit of despair. Every day was a struggle, with people feeling totally helpless and lost about what would happen next. Yao, the chief of the tribal confederation, watched helplessly as his people struggled in the floods, his heart weighed down with worry. He urgently called together the leaders of the 4 tribal alliances, known as the Four, Yue, and the nobles of his court in a simple council hall to deliberate on plans to control the floods. The mood in the hall was heavy, with everyone frowning deeply and their eyes filled with anxiety. After heated discussion, they unanimously recommended Gun to take charge of the flood control mission. Gun came from a noble family and was widely known for his intelligence. In the eyes of his young son Yu, his father had always been an all-powerful hero. Every night, the young Yu would snuggle up to his father and listen to him talk about his visions and ambitions for taming the floods, his eyes shining with admiration and longing. With everyone's hopes resting on him and his son's wide-eyed admiration, Gun took on the mission full of confidence. He led the people to use the old-school blocking method, building dams with mud and stones, trying to trap that raging flood. Young Daiyu would often tag along behind his dad, watching him boss folks around to haul dirt and rocks, his eyes practically sparkling with wonder at this whole flood fighting thing. But man, that flood was way more powerful than anyone thought. As the water kept rising, those dams just kept crumbling one after another under the non-stop pounding. 9 years went by, and Gun's efforts didn't just flop. They made the floods worse, turning people's lives into even more of a nightmare. In the end, Emperor Shun had Gun executed on Yi Mountain for failing to control the floods. That devastating news hit Daiyu like a ton of bricks, like a lightning bolt out of nowhere. Daiyu stood right where his dad had fallen, staring at those floods still tearing everything up. Man, his heart was going wild with all these mixed up feelings. Grief, frustration, anger, they were all tangled up in there. But more than anything, there was this rock-solid determination to pick up where his dad left off. He knew deep down his old man wasn't some loser, just had the wrong game plan. And Daiyu wasn't about to let all his dad's sweat and struggle go down the drain. No way was he gonna let the people keep drowning in this mess either. After Shun took the throne, he saw firsthand how the floods were wrecking people's lives, and he was dead set on putting an end to this nightmare for good. He turned to the 4 lords again for suggestions, and they all jumped in recommending Gun's son Yu. People said Yu didn't just inherit his dad's smarts, he had this insane level of grit and determination that most folks just didn't have. Dude was super kind, humble, worked his tail off, and kept things so simple. He'd literally eat the same food and crash in the same spots as regular folks, so everyone adored him. But the biggest thing, Yu had been tagging along with his dad doing flood control since he was a kid, so he'd picked up tons of hands-on experience. He knew these floods like the back of his hand, what made them tick, where they'd strike next, all of it. Shun didn't let old grudges or bad blood get in the way. Even when people tried to shoot down the idea, he shut it down and named Yu as Minister of Works, telling him to pick up where his dad left off. Like Shun was basically saying, this guy gets it, let him run with it. And Yu was ready. He wasn't about to let his dad's legacy die or let the people keep suffering. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, ready to tackle this mess head on. Dayu knew this was the heaviest weight he'd ever shouldered. This wasn't just a job. It was make or break for the whole damn Huasai clan. And yeah, it was his shot to wipe the slate clean for his dad, to finish what the old man started. He swore to himself, as long as these floods are raging, I'm not stepping foot home. I'll bust my ass till I tame this beast and give these people peace. So with everyone's eyes on him, Dayu hugged his sick, utterly mom goodbye, kissed his brand new bride, who was still in that honeymoon glow, and marched straight into the storm. No looking back. He totally ditched his dad's block-em-up playbook and came up with this wild new plan. Dig channels, let the water roll. Grabbing his measuring ropes and tools, he rounded up his crew, badass guys like Boi and Hoji, and hit the road from Jizhou, ready to trek all 9 provinces. Everywhere they went, he'd study the lay of the land like a detective, mapping mountains, tracing rivers, noting every dip and slope. Half the time, they were hacking through thorn bushes so thick they'd bleed, or scrambling up cliffs that looked like they'd crumble any second. People got sliced by rocks, stabbed by thorns, but Dayu was always up front, leading the charge like a freaking bulldozer. Then came Longmen Mountain. Those rocks were like steel, and all they had were stone axes and hammers. Under the blazing sun, they'd swing till sparks flew, and their hands were nothing but blisters. One day, the mountain just gave way. Rocks came crashing down, burying guys alive. People were screaming, crying. Dayu's heart sank, but he snapped into action, rallying the rescue, reworking the plan. Years later, they finally busted through that mountain, and the Yellow River just exploded through the gap like a freight train. Digging out the rivers was no picnic either. They'd be knee-deep in sludge, hauling mud in wicker baskets, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, catching all kinds of nasty diseases from the dirty water. When a mountain blocked the way, they grabbed their tools and started carving through it like it was no big deal. Once on the Jishui River, they hit this gnarly geological fault. Water kept leaking, and the project stalled. Dayu stayed up night after night, brainstorming, until he cooked up this layered rammed earth plus wooden stone foundations trick. Tons of trial and error, but eventually they nailed it. During those 13 years of water control, Dayu lived a life of total hardship, eating rough meals in the wind and sleeping out in the open. Never having a stable home, he wore out pair after pair of straw sandals, and his rough linen clothes got torn to shreds by wind and rain. His skin turned dark and rough from the scorching sun. His hands were covered in thick calluses, and his legs were covered in sores from being soaked in water for so long. But he always had the people in his heart, even passing by his own home 3 times without ever going in. The first time he passed by, he heard his wife's pained groans during childbirth and his baby's first cries. He paused for a moment at the door, but then turned away, because he knew that only by curing the flood as soon as possible could he protect more families like his own. The second time, the child was already babbling and reaching out small hands to call him father. He just waved at them and kept walking on his water control path. By then, his heart was full of guilt toward his family, but his resolve to control the floods never wavered. The third time, the child had grown into a young adult and ran out to try to stop him. He stroked the child's head, gave a few words of advice, and hurried off again, because he understood that his father's unfinished mission was still waiting ahead of him. During the flood control efforts, Dayu also faced the tricky task of coordinating different groups. People from various tribes spoke different languages and had different customs, often clashing over work assignments and supply distribution. Dayu mediated patiently, winning everyone's trust with his fairness. He managed to unite the scattered forces into a single team. Plus, The famine caused by the floods constantly threatened the crew. He led Huji to teach people how to grow drought-resistant crops and turn wastelands into farmland, making sure there was always enough food to go around. After countless days and nights of hard work, Dayu finally led the people to dredge 9 major rivers and dig countless ditches, guiding the floodwaters smoothly into the sea through the new channels. The lands once submerged by floods came back to life. Folks returned to their homes, planted crops, and started living stable lives again. Dayu's victory wasn't just about saving the ancient Chinese people from disaster. It became a symbol of our nation's grit, wisdom, and courage. His story and spirit have been passed down for generations, becoming part of the very soul of Chinese civilization and remain an endless source of inspiration for all of us. The story of Dayu taming the floods is like an eternal spiritual torch, lighting up the Chinese nation's thousands of years of civilizational journey. The perseverance and selfless dedication it embodies have deeply seeped into the nation's blood, becoming a spiritual totem for Chinese people when facing hardships. Later scholars and poets often used Dayu as a theme in their works. For example, the Tang poet Li Bai wrote, "Dayu managed the rivers while his baby cried. He didn't even pick inside his home," vividly praising his noble spirit of putting the community above his own family. Liu Zongyuan, a Shang Dynasty thinker, explored the connection between Dayu's flood control and power inheritance in his essay Matters of Shun and Yu, adding philosophical depth to the story. In terms of cultural symbols, Dayu and flood control have become unique emblems of Chinese civilization. Temples dedicated to Yu and steles marking his historic sites across China carry people's respect for this ancient sage in traditional operas. Dayu's image is brought to life through artistic performances, making the flood control story widely known. Even in folk legends, magical elements like Dayu transforming into a divine turtle or being aided by the dragon-like creature Yinlong show both ancient people's awe of nature and their cultural imagination. In politics, the wisdom of channeling that Dayu pioneered in flood control has inspired governance concepts for generations. The idea that it's better to channel than to block became a key strategy for rulers to resolve conflicts, from building water conservancy projects to mediating social tensions. You can see the legacy of Dayu's philosophy. His dedication of passing by his home 3 times without entering also set a benchmark for official virtue, influencing the formation of traditional Chinese political ethics. Today, the spirit of Dayu still shines brightly in modern times, whether fighting natural disasters like floods and earthquakes or overcoming technological challenges on the path to national rejuvenation. Chinese people continue to carry forward the spirit of fearing no hardships and striving together. Dayu's legend has long transcended simple historical narrative. It's become the brightest pearl in the Chinese nation's spiritual and cultural treasure trove, guiding generation after generation of Chinese people to forge ahead. When Emperor Shun solemnly placed the Black Jade tablet symbolizing flood control achievements into Dayu's hands, the 13-year-long battle to control the floods finally came to an end. But what awaited Dayu wasn't a peaceful retirement after success. Instead, it was more complicated power struggles and the heavy responsibility of governing a nation. During the flood control efforts, Dayu carried a measuring rope and a set square, leading the people across the mountains and rivers of the 9 provinces. Sometimes he'd direct the digging of river channels on steep cliffs. Other times he'd wield a hoe himself in muddy swamps. Not only did he carve out channels to divert the floods, but he also built up prestige that transcended tribal boundaries along the way. Elders from various tribes whispered among themselves, "This hero who passed by his home 3 times without entering might just be the leader who can guide Huasha into a new era." After successfully taming the floods, Dayu's prestige was at its peak. That's when the Samel tribe in the south started getting restless. Legend has it that Samel was a confederation of descendants of Chiyo, the ancient tribal leader who'd been defeated by Emperor Yao for causing chaos, but had always remained a thorn in the side of the Central Plain tribes. Following Emperor Shun's orders, Dayu took advantage of Samya's internal disasters, constant natural calamities, and a spreading plague to lead a well-trained army in a campaign against them. Before setting out, Dayu performed a solemn sacrifice at the altar, praying earnestly to heaven, earth, and ancestors for protection. On the battlefield, war drums thundered like rolling thunder. Dayu, clad in animal-hide armor, stood on a high platform, calm and composed as he directed the troops. He held a bronze command flag, adjusting his strategies flexibly based on the battlefield situation. His soldiers, wielding bronze weapons, charged fearlessly into the enemy lines, their shield clashes and battle cries shaking the heavens. After months of fierce fighting, the Samel army retreated step by step and was finally driven all the way to the Han River basin, far from the Central Plains. This victory not only secured the safety of the Central Plain Tribal Alliance, but also catapulted Dayu's prestige to new heights. People across the land thanked him gratefully, and tribal chiefs everywhere pledged their loyalty. After consulting with the Foyue elders, Emperor Shun formally named Dayu as his successor. He even personally taught Dayu how to handle state affairs and gifted him an ivory ceremonial tablet, a symbol of power, to pave the way for the transition of leadership. In the days that followed, Dayu accompanied Shun in managing all manner of government affairs, learning the art of governance and growing through hands-on experience. 17 years after Emperor Shun began his travels to inspect the land, he sadly died during a southern tour. Following ancient customs, Dayu mourned for him for 3 years. During that time, Dayu lived in a simple thatched hut, ate plain food every day, and was deep in grief for Emperor Shun. When the mourning period ended, he withdrew to Yangcheng as per the tradition of abdication, trying to hand the throne over to Shun's son Shang Jun, but the lords from across the land broke this show of modesty with their actions. The chief of the Tushan clan led hundreds of strong warriors on a non-stop march to Yangcheng. The leader of the Dongyi tribe brought precious shells and jade as gifts. The Bashu tribe even sent bronze ritual vessels. Suddenly, the roads to Yangcheng were filled with horses and carriages, kicking up clouds of dust. The lords all turned their backs on Shang Jun and gathered in Yangcheng to bow to Dayu. Looking at the crowd kneeling before him, Dayu knew where the people's loyalty lay and formally took the throne. At his coronation ceremony, Dayu wore a splendid royal robe as he accepted the Lord's homage, marking the beginning of a new ruling era. After taking the throne, Dayu knew the country was newly stabilized but still had a mountain of things to fix. He decided to follow the ancient sage kings and set out on a royal tour to inspect the land. He left Yangcheng in a wooden chariot pulled by 4 white horses, a big flag with 9 tassels fluttering on top to show his royal power. The whole procession was huge and impressive. Everywhere he went, people lined the roads, cheering, and gave him wine and food as gifts. In the east, he saw the Dongyi tribe was great at making pottery, but after the floods, the roads were so bad they couldn't sell their goods far away. Dayu quickly ordered workers to fix the roads, opening up trade routes between the Central Plains and Dongyi. When they hit rivers while building the roads, he went to check the land himself and showed people how to build simple bridges. The Dongyi chief was so grateful that his tribe started sending beautiful pottery to Dayu every year as a tribute. Out west, he found the Chang people made a living by herding, but they often fought with nearby tribes over grazing land. Dayu called all the tribe leaders together. drew clear lines for where each tribe's pasture was, and set up special officials to solve disputes. Soon the western border was peaceful again. He also taught them better herding skills to help them raise more livestock. To make the country more stable, Daiyu started a tribute system. He divided the land into 9 provinces and set different rules for what each should pay based on how fertile their land was and what resources they had. Jizhou, with its rich soil and lots of crops, had to send top-grade grain and silk every year. Yangzhou, with all its rivers and lakes and good fishing, had to send pearls, ivory, and seafood. To make sure the system was fair, Daiyu took officials who measured land and visited all 9 provinces. In Yuzhou, a tribe chief tried to hide some good farmland to pay less tribute. When Daiyu found out, he didn't punish him right away. Instead, he took the chief to the fields and measured the land in front of him. The chief felt so ashamed that he not only paid what he owed, but offered to help watch over the tribute collection in his area. After that, Daiyu visited each province many times to check how the system was working and changed it where needed. Once the tribute system was solid, Daiyu decided to cast 9 bronze tripods to symbolize the unity of the 9 provinces and show off his royal power. He told all the lords of the 9 provinces to send bronze as tribute, and all that metal was hauled to Yangcheng. At the casting site, hundreds of skilled artisans worked day and night. They set up massive furnaces where the flames burned so fiercely they turned half the sky red. Daiyu personally oversaw the whole thing, often chatting with the craftsmen about how to get the casting just right. After months of hard labor, the 9 huge bronze tripods finally took shape. Each one represented a province, carved with that area's mountains, rivers, rare animals, and local customs. Once they were done, the tripods were placed in the main hall of the royal palace, shining brightly as symbols of imperial power. Whenever lords came to pay their respects, they were totally awed by the tripods' majesty, making them even more in awe of Daiyu's rule. Those 9 tripods didn't just lock down Daiyu's power, they also quietly made all the tribes feel more connected as part of the same Huasai community, making the whole kingdom's order even stronger. In terms of governance, Daiyu followed the abdication tradition and named Gao Yao, the chief of the Yin tribe, as his heir. Gao Yao assisted Daiyu in handling state affairs and improving criminal laws, adhering to the philosophy of applying 5 punishments wisely to support 5 moral teachings, stressing the combination of education and punishment. Whenever resolving land disputes or property conflicts between tribes, Gao Yao always prioritized moral persuasion first, only resorting to punishment for those who refused to change after repeated warnings. Once, 2 neighboring tribes fought over unclear border demarcations. Gao Yao personally went to mediate, patiently listening to both sides' grievances before redrawing the boundaries based on past customs and fairness, ultimately resolving the conflict. When lords in the Jiangwei region grew discontent with Daiyu's succession, Gao Yao tirelessly toured the area multiple times, visiting tribes to praise Daiyu's virtues and achievements, diffusing potential crises one by one. Tragically, talent was envied by heaven. Gao Yao passed away in the 2nd year of Daiyu's reign. As a result, Daiyu chose Bo Yi, who had overseen geographical record-keeping during the flood control efforts, as the new heir. From then on, Daiyu began teaching Bo Yi how to manage state affairs and shared his governance experience, hoping he would become a worthy successor. Over the next decade, Daiyu continued to deepen his governance efforts. He and Bo Yi led major overhauls of criminal laws, refining categories of crimes and punishment standards to make the legal code clearer. Meanwhile, he ordered the construction of sturdy prisons across the land to detain lawbreakers and maintain social order. To safeguard national security, He established a well-trained, well-equipped standing army, organizing regular drills for soldiers in military formations and tactics. Additionally, Dai convened astronomy and calendar experts to observe the movements of celestial bodies, creating the Shakilinja based on agricultural needs to guide people in planting and harvesting at the right times. Through these measures, the kingdom gradually transitioned from a tribal confederation to a unified state, with the embryonic form of the Shang Dynasty taking shape. In the 10th year of his reign, Yu once again embarked on a tour of the world. He still rode in the same big chariot pulled by white horses, and with a group of attendants, he traveled all the way to inspect the governance of various places. When the group arrived at Kuaiji, now Shaoxing, Zhejiang province, Dai Yu died there because his body was overwhelmed by years of hard work. His death caused great sorrow to the people of the world, and the foundation he laid also left a colorful mark on the formal establishment of the Shang Dynasty and the development of Chinese civilization. Yu the Great was the first emperor of the Shang Dynasty, and he made immortal contributions to the establishment and development of the Shang Dynasty. Today, the Yu Temple, Yu Mausoleum, and Yu Ancestral Temple on Kuaiji Mountain have become important sites for people to commemorate Yu the Great. His stories and spirit have been passed down from generation to generation, becoming a shared memory of the Chinese nation. After Yu the Great's death, the transfer of power became the focus of the tribal confederacy at that time. According to the traditional abdication system, leadership shall be conferred upon the virtuous and capable. A virtuous and capable successor should have been elected to inherit the throne. However, under the complex social circumstances of the era, Qi, the son of Yu the Great, broke with convention and ascended to the throne by virtue of his father's immense residual influence and his own accumulated power. This move completely ended the abdication system that had endured for generations. Chinese history thus shifted from a public world collective sovereignty system to a family world dynastic patrimonialism, and a private ownership society gradually took shape. This transformation became a crucial turning point in Chinese history, profoundly influencing the political landscape for thousands of years thereafter. After Qi succeeded to the throne, some powerful princes were very dissatisfied with Qi's hereditary succession to the throne. Among these princes, the Youhu clan was the representative, and they jointly opposed Qi's rule, facing the challenge. Each was well aware that his ruling foundation was not yet solid. In order to safeguard the newly born hereditary system, he resolutely decided to send troops to crusade. Before the war, in order to boost morale, Qi made a passionate speech in front of the army, claiming that the Youhu clan had violated the will of heaven and was the public enemy of the world, while he himself was following the mandate of heaven and shouldering the heavy responsibility of maintaining world order. However, in the early stage of the war, relying on geographical advantages and a brave combat style, the Youhu clan caused heavy casualties to Qi's army. Ish suffered consecutive defeats and fell into a desperate situation. But Qi did not lose heart. He drew painful lessons, re-examined the strategies and tactics, rectified the military discipline, and strengthened the training of soldiers. After a period of adjustment, Qi launched another attack. This time, his army was in high morale and flexible in tactics, and finally defeated the Youhu clan. The defeated members of the Youhu clan were punished as slaves, and Qi's majesty was demonstrated. After defeating the Youhu clan, Qi convened a tribal alliance meeting at Juntai, now south of Yixing County, Henan province, to demonstrate his victory to the world, historically known as the Shang of Juntai. This alliance meeting signified the complete consolidation of Qi's ruling position and the formal establishment of the hereditary monarchy system. During Qi's reign, there were continuous military conflicts with the Dongyi tribes externally. The two sides engaged in several fierce confrontations to compete for resources and territories. However, within the palace, Qi's life underwent a drastic transformation. Unlike his father Yu the Great, who was diligent and thrifty, Qi began to indulge in pleasure and often held luxurious banquets. Qi himself was talented and versatile, especially skilled in singing and dancing. At the banquets, there was much singing and dancing, presenting a scene of extravagance and dissipation. Qi had 5 sons: Tai Kang, Yuan Kang, Bo Kang, Rong Kang, and Wu Guan. Growing up in such an environment, they laid the groundwork for the future fate of the Shang Dynasty in 2050 BCE. Qi reached the end of his life, and his eldest son, Tai Kang, inherited the throne. A new page in the history of the Shang Dynasty was turned, and what awaited it would be more unknown challenges and transformations. After Qi's passing, his eldest son Tai Kang ascended the throne. This should have marked a new starting point for the steady development of the Shang Dynasty, but it instead became the beginning of a series of upheavals. Since childhood, Tai Kang had indulged in pleasure alongside his father Qi and had not learned any skills in governing the country. After officially ascending the throne, he not only showed no signs of change but became even more extravagant and dissipated. He spent his days immersed in the joyous songs and laughter of banquets, all intoxicated by the excitement of hunting and sightseeing, completely neglecting state affairs. In that era of tribal alliances, the actions of the monarch directly influenced the cohesion among the tribes. Tai Kang's incompetent rule caused the tribes that had originally submitted to the Shang Dynasty to become disaffected and stop obeying the Shah's orders, shaking the very foundation of the Shang Dynasty's rule. Tai Kang's prolonged neglect of state affairs, including his months-long absences for pleasure-seeking excursions, undoubtedly opened the door for ambitious schemers. Hou Yi, the chief of the Yu Song clan, was such a figure who had long coveted power. Seizing the opportune moment when Tai Kang was away, Hou Yi acted decisively and seized political power in one swift move. Deprived of authority, Tai Kang became like a stray dog, forced to flee in humiliation to seek refuge with the Zhenxun clan of the Zhenxun tribe. After gaining control, Hou Yi did not rush to assume the throne, but was well versed in the political tactic of using the Son of Heaven to command the lords. He first exiled Tai Kang's younger brothers and their mother to weaken potential opposition, then installed Zhong Kang, another brother of Tai Kang, as king while positioning himself as a supporter to build a power network behind the scenes. Hou Yi's first step in consolidating power was a major reshuffle of the court. He placed trusted allies in key official positions, firmly controlling military, financial, and other critical departments through his inner circle. For ministers unwilling to pledge allegiance, Hou Yi either suppressed them with fabricated charges or nominally promoted them while stripping them of real authority. Economically, he dominated vital material distribution channels by monopolizing strategic resources like salt and copper. This not only filled his own treasury, but also forced various tribes to rely on him, thereby achieving economic dominance over the Shang Dynasty. Hou Yi's usurpation of power naturally aroused strong opposition from some tribes, among them the Xi and He tribes, which were in charge of astronomy and calendar, openly defied Hou Yi's orders. In ancient times, astronomy and calendar were closely linked to agricultural production and sacrificial activities and held extremely high status. Hou Yi was well aware that suppressing these two tribes could not only eliminate dissent, but also demonstrate his authority. Therefore, he used the pretext that the Xi and He tribes had confused the 4 seasons and the sequence of hours in a day as an excuse to carefully plan a military campaign. Before the war, Hou Yi personally selected generals equipped the army with high-quality weapons and equipment, and composed Yan Zheng to boost the army's morale. In this campaign, Hou Yi was determined to win. Eventually, his army defeated the Xi and He tribes, further consolidating his behind-the-scenes rule and making other tribes witness his iron-fisted methods. After Zhong Kang's death, his son Shang succeeded to the throne. On the surface, Hou Yi continued to support Shang, but in reality, he was secretly undermining Shang's power. At the beginning of Shang's reign, under Hou Yi's auspices, the Shang Dynasty dispatched troops to attack tribes such as the Huayi Fengyi and Huang Yi. These military campaigns seemingly aimed to expand the territory of the Shang Dynasty, but in fact, Hou Yi was establishing his own prestige through war while depleting the military forces loyal to the Shah royal family. As Hou Yi's military and political prestige grew, Yang gradually became a puppet monarch and eventually had to seek refuge with the Zhenxun and Zhongguan clans within the Shah tribe. Thereafter, Hou Yi finally no longer concealed his ambition, officially ascended to the position of monarch and moved the capital to Qinxi of the Yusong clan, completing the transition from behind-the-scenes manipulation to front-stage rule. However, Hou Yi's rule was also short-lived. Although he was skilled in archery and highly proficient in martial arts, he was not good at governing the country, and like Tai Can, enjoyed pleasure and hunting. Hou Yi entrusted the state affairs to Han Zhuo while dismissing virtuous officials such as Wu Luo, Bo Yin, Seung Kun, and Long Yu. Han Zhuo was born into the Boming clan, but was expelled for his belligerent nature. After taking refuge with Hou Yi, he repeatedly achieved military merits through his own methods and thus gained Hou Yi's trust. However, Han Zhuo's ambition was no smaller than Hou Yi's. He was waiting for an opportunity to replace Hou Yi and monopolize power. The fate of the Shah dynasty would once again undergo a drastic transformation due to Han Zhuo's ambition. This period of history, full of political scheming and strife, demonstrates the turbulent changes on the political stage in the early Shah dynasty, and also reveals how power tests human nature and profoundly influences a nation's destiny. Han Zhu was born into poverty, but had been cunning and ambitious since childhood. He was well aware of Hou Yi's fatuousness and slackness, so he secretly schemed to usurp power. Hou Yi's wife, Chunhu, was a beautiful and intelligent woman who had always been melancholy. She harbored resentment because of Hou Yi's neglect. Han Zhu keenly detected Chunhu's discontent and carefully plotted to collude with her in secret. In the dead of night, they held clandestine consultations in the depths of the palace. With sweet words and promises of future power, Han Zhu successfully persuaded Chunhu to join forces with him. Thereafter, they conspired to frame and kill loyal ministers around Hou Yi, such as Wu Luo, one by one under various fabricated charges, constantly eliminating dissent and removing obstacles to their grasp of power. As Han Zhuo's power grew increasingly strong, he deemed the time ripe and resolutely took action to kill Hou Yi. Han Zhuo then proclaimed himself king, established Chunhu as his principal consort to demonstrate the legitimacy of his status. Before long, Chunhu gave birth to two sons for Han Zhuo named Yi and Jiao. To consolidate his rule, Han Zhuo impoverished Yi with the land of Ji and Zhao with the land of Guo, while he himself founded the Han state, ushering in a new era of governance. In order to further expand his sphere of influence, Han Zhuo dispatched Zhao to lead a large army to attack the Zhenxun and Zhongguan clans. During the fierce warfare, Zhao displayed formidable military talent and ultimately breached the city walls, killing Shang, the then Sha Qin. Just when Han Zhuo thought he had everything under control, Shang's wife Min miraculously escaped back to her natal clan, Yu Renshi. Amid the chaos of war, at the time, Min was pregnant and under the protection of Yuan Shi, she with great difficulty gave birth to Shang's posthumous son Shao Kahn. Shao Kahn grew up under the care of Yuan Shi and served as the Muzhen herd supervisor of Yuan Shi, in charge of livestock management. However, when Zhao learned of Shao Kahn's existence and feared he might become a future threat, he immediately sent men to Yuan Shi to hunt down Shao Kahn. In a life-or-death crisis, Shao Kahn had no choice but to flee Yuan Shi and seek refuge with the Yu Shi clan. When Yu Su, the chief of the Yu clan, saw that Shao Kahn was dignified in appearance and extraordinarily intelligent, he firmly believed that Shao Kahn was no ordinary man destined to remain in a lowly position. Therefore, Yu Su not only appointed Shao Kahn as Pao Jun in charge of palace food affairs, but also married his 2 daughters to Shao Kahn and granted him cities, fields, and an army. Shao Kahn was acutely aware that this was his hope to revive the Xia, his hope to revive the immolated, benevolent Me, a surviving minister of the Shang Dynasty from the Yu clan who had always been committed to reviving the Shang, united the followers of the Jinxuan and Zhengguan clans and all pledged allegiance to Shao Kahn. Shao Kahn also dispatched a clever spy Nu Wai to infiltrate the Han state and gather intelligence. After years of meticulous preparation, Shao Kahn's forces finally grew strong enough. He personally led a large army in a fierce attack against Tuanzhou. During the intense battle, Shao Kahn's army fought. Thereafter, Shao Kahn sent an army to eliminate Zhao, while his son Zhu destroyed Yi. Thus, the Shang Dynasty's rule, which had been interrupted for decades, was restored. This period of history is known as the revitalization under Shao Kahn in later generations. After the death of Shao Kahn, his son Zhu ascended the throne. Zhu was a monarch of great vision and strategic acumen. Well aware of the importance of military power to the state, he dedicated himself to research and invented spears and armor, which significantly enhanced the army's combat capability. Thereafter, Zhu was committed to expanding the Shang Dynasty's territory, leading his troops to continuously advance eastward and campaign against the Dongyi tribes. During the prolonged military campaigns, the Shang army traversed mountains and ridges, dense forests and turbulent rivers, engaging in fierce battles with the Dongyi tribes time and again. Eventually, the Shang army reached the shores of the East China Sea, incorporating vast lands into the Shang Dynasty's territory. Under Zhu's reign, the Shang Dynasty reached its zenith, and he was deeply beloved by the Shang people. After Zhu's death, his son Huai succeeded him. Huai inherited his father's ambition, and during his reign, the Shang Dynasty continued its external expansion. Huai successively conquered 9 tribes in the Huai and Sishui river basins, including Chuanyi, Yuyi, Fangyi, Huangyi, Baiyi, Qi, Suanyi, Fengyi, and Yangyi. In the process of conquering these tribes, there were both intense wars and cultural exchanges and integration between the Shang Dynasty and the various tribes. With the submission of these tribes, the power of the Shang Dynasty grew steadily, and its influence became increasingly far-reaching. After Huai's death, his son Man took the throne. During Man's reign, the Shang Dynasty's rule remained relatively stable. Upon Man's death, his son Xie succeeded him. During Xie's reign, the Shang Dynasty ceased large-scale external expansions. After years of development, the Dongyi tribes gradually integrated into the Shang Dynasty's ruling system. To appease the Dongyi tribes and strengthen their governance, Xie conferred noble titles upon Quanyi, Baiyi, Zanyi, Fengyi, Qi, and Huangyi, further consolidating the Shang Dynasty's rule through this approach. After Xie's death, his son Buyan ascended the throne. Shortly after Buyan took the throne, a rebellion broke out in the Juyuan region. Facing the sudden rebellion, Buyan remained calm and composed, quickly deploying troops and formulating a thorough counter-insurgency strategy. Under his command, the Shang Dynasty's army launched a rapid attack and soon quelled the rebellion. during Biyang's reign. His younger brother, Jiong Long, assisted him in handling state affairs. Zhang was intelligent and capable, demonstrating outstanding talent in dealing with government affairs and making important contributions to the stability and development of the Shang Dynasty. Therefore, after 59 years on the throne, Baiyang passed the throne to his younger brother, Jiong. 10 years later, Baiyang passed away. Jiong ruled for 18 years and then died. After that, his son Jin succeeded to the throne. Jin reigned for 8 years. Since he had no suitable heir, he passed the throne to Kongjia, the son of Biyang. At this point, after going through many storms, the inheritance of the throne of the Shang Dynasty returned to Buyang's lineage, and the history of the Shang Dynasty would continue to write new chapters under Kongjia's rule. In 1872 BC, during the 8th year of the reign of Jin, the 13th monarch of the Shang Dynasty, a startling prodigy occurred across the central plains. 10 sun-like shadows simultaneously emerged in the sky, their golden halos overlapping layer upon layer, turning the midday sky into a sea of molten gold. At the time, people did not understand this as a Perihelion phenomenon caused by ice crystal refraction, but believed it to be a punishment from the heavenly emperor. Amidst the divination chants of the wizards, Kongjia, who had just ascended the throne, made a fateful decision that would alter the dynasty's destiny. He dismantled the bronze ritual vessels dedicated to ancestral worship in the imperial ancestral temple and constructed a towering 10-jang-high altar to gods and spirits outside the capital. Every new moon, he would sacrifice 100 pure-colored livestock, letting their blood flow like a river down the white jade steps. This ancestral-defying form of sacrifice quickly incited the nobility's discontent, yet Kongjia indulged in the delirium of conversing with ghosts and gods, even ordering palace maids to dress as fox spirits and perform naked dances during rituals. Thus, the ritual and legal systems of the Shang Dynasty began to crumble. After ruling for 31 years, Kongjia was succeeded by his son Gao and grandson Fa, but neither was able to reverse the Shang Dynasty's decline. In 1652 BCE FV Gui, Fa's son ascended the throne, standing 8 feet tall and strong enough to wrestle tigers. This monarch was destined to become the gravedigger of the Shang Dynasty. At the time of Li Gui's succession, the Shang state in the east had already begun to show its prowess. Yet during his coronation ceremony, he boiled rare birds tribute from vassals in a bronze wine tripod and in full view of the assembly, twisted off the neck of a court musician simply because the performance of the Shang music was insufficiently spirited. He ordered the construction of the King Gong Palace outside Zhenshun City, mobilized 100,000 laborers to dig a moat, whose bottom was paved with cinnabar transported from Jingchu. The water surface floated with layers of lotus-shaped lanterns, which at night gave the appearance of a flowing river of blood. 4 years later, in the height of summer, Jie personally led a massive army to campaign against the Yushi tribe in the east. This tribe, which had submitted to the Shang Dynasty for 100 years, had raised the banner of rebellion due to unbearable heavy taxes. When the Shang army breached the capital of Wuji, Mo Shi, only 16 years old, was forced onto the steps for presenting captives. A blood-stained jade hairpin adorned her temple, yet her gaze was colder than the edge of a sword. The moment Jie saw her, he was first conquered by this thorny beauty. He lifted Mo Shi onto the chariot forged of pure gold, its yoke decorated with 9 streamer white banners that fluttered fiercely in the wind, as if heralding the arrival of the Shang Qing's new favorite. 7 years trickled by on the bronze clepsydra in the ancestral temple, as Jie's atrocities grew more brazen. When Zhonggu, the grand historian, burst into the royal palace, clutching oracle bones, inscribed with omens of disaster. He found Jie having Macy's feet massaged in warm golden paste. Your Majesty, the Yi and Lu rivers have run dry for 3 months, and the Sanchuan region has suffered 7 earthquakes. These are warnings from heaven. Jungu's white hair clung to his sweat-drenched brow, but his plea was met with laughter echoing through the halls. I am the sun. How could the sun fall? Trembling, the old minister gathered his oracle bones and fled that night to the Shang state, carrying ancestral astronomical records. As he stood on the walls of Shang City and watched Chen Tang personally brush dust from his robes, tears streamed down his face. Heaven blesses Shang. The Shang Dynasty's mandate is spent. Even more tragic was the fate of Guanlongpang. This full-ring veteran stormed the construction site of Jie's expanding Yaotai Pavilion, clutching bronze ritual vessels left by past kings. The great labored until his hands and feet were calloused, taming floods. Shokong revived the dynasty, working ceaselessly day and night. Now, Your Majesty drains the people's strength for luxury. Surely, this is not what heaven decrees. His remonstrance earned him Jie's jade axe. As the blade split the vessel, Guanlongpang's blood stained the broken bronze, inscribed with "Revere heaven and protect the people." Thereafter, the Shah court rang with nothing but flattery, while curses spread like wildfire among the people. When will this sun die? We'll perish with you. The people raged at the sky, willing to die with this sun rather than endure him another day. While Jie was constructing a wine pool on the Yaotai Pavilion, where Meishi could sail boats, an entirely different scene was unfolding in Shangyi to the west. Cheng Tang stood before the Mulberry Grove altar, personally helping farmers guide the plow, while Yi Yin recorded the words of every worthy scholar beside him. Descendant of Xie and mindful of the legend, the blackbird gave birth to Shang. Cheng Tang removed 3 sides of the hunting net, leaving only one side facing north. In 1601 BCE, Chen Tang decided to test Jie's authority by intentionally halting the annual tributes. Jie slammed his desk in fury and immediately mobilized the armies of the 9 Yi tribes. When scouts reported, all 9 Yi have answered the call. Cheng Tang smiled with understanding. This was the opportunity he had awaited. Clutching a jade jam tablet inscribed with blackbird motifs, he knelt outside Chitai prison to plead guilty, his carts loaded with Yuji jade, Minshan rhinoceros horns, and East Sea pearls. These treasures quenched Jie's anger instantly. Smart of you, Marquis of Shang, Jie sneered, fondling Meishi's new jade bracelet as he waved for Cheng Tang's release. He did not see the flash of resolve in Cheng Tang's eyes as the latter turned away. 3 years later, in the late autumn, envoys from the 9 Yi tribes knelt outside Jie's palace gates, presenting not tributes, but letters of severance. Jie's bronze wine vessel crashed to the floor, its contents spilling across the county pot tiles like glaring blood. Cheng Tang knew the time had come. At Jinghao Plains, he raised the 3 Zhanghai alliance altar where chariots of 800 vassal lords converged. As ox ears were sacrificed to heaven, Cheng Tang's oath thundered across the sky. Asia has committed countless crimes. Heaven commands its punishment. The decisive battle first broke out at Junshu. Jie personally drove his 6-horse chariot, its crossbar inlaid with turquoise that glinted coldly in the sun. But his royal army was no longer the fearsome force of old. As soldiers stared at the blackbird standard waving in Shang's ranks, they recalled how Cheng Tang had left grain and medicine in their villages during his marches. When war drums sounded, the Shai army's right flank suddenly collapsed. The Kunu clan forces, already secretly pledged to Shang, had turned. Jie's chariot sank into mud amid the chaos, and he watched in horror as Cheng Tang's blackbird standard drew nearer. feeling fear for the first time. The final showdown came on the Mingtiao Plains. Violent wind whipped up yellow sand, dyeing heaven and earth gold. She stood on a high platform, watching his army fall like autumn leaves before Shang's advance. Macy's jade hairpin had somehow fallen out. Seeing Jia's panicked expression, she suddenly laughed. "Aren't you the sun, Your Majesty? Why can't you even withstand the wind?" Before the words faded, Shang's spears crashed through the palace gates. Changtang looked at the once imperious tyrant and sighed. Heaven's mandate is not fixed. It aids only the virtuous. In 1600 BC, EJ was exiled to the wilds of Nanchao. As he lay in a damp, fact hut, gazing at the continuous drizzle outside the window, he suddenly recalled the ancestral portraits he had seen in the Grand Temple years ago. Yu the Great holding a wooden plow and spade, and Qi wearing a royal crown to receive homage from vassal lords. At last, he understood that when the sun ceases to shine upon the people, it is destined to be replaced by a new dawn. In the distance, in Shayi, Changtan was holding a grand heaven-worshipping ceremony. The cry of the blackbird pierced the clouds, proclaiming the birth of a new dynasty. As the last wisp of dust from Xia Jie's chariot vanished among the mountains of Nanchao, the first ray of hereditary royal power that had shone for over 400 years in China finally dimmed and extinguished amid tyranny and public resentment. At this moment, the gears of history turned abruptly. Town of Shang raised the banner of heaven's mandate to punish him, building a new dynasty beneath the rammed earth walls of Bo capital. The clanging of bronze ritual vessels intertwined with the cheers of the people, announcing another significant leap in Chinese history from obscurity to civilization. Looking back at the Shang Dynasty, this dynasty that broke through the chaos of primitive tribes with its family-based rule system was like the morning star at the dawn of Chinese civilization. Its established official rank system and criminal laws, like precise mortars and tenon joints, bound loose states into the initial form of a nation. The Xia calendar, carrying the wisdom of ancient ancestors, outlined the poles of agrarian civilization with the 24 solar terms. Still echoing across the Chinese land today, this dynasty, founded on the spirit of Yu the Great controlling floods, not only laid the political structure of the sovereign of the 9 provinces, but also inscribed the earliest genetic code of Chinese civilization through primitive patterns on pottery and sacrificial vessels in altars, laying the foundation for the legitimacy of subsequent dynasties and the identification with Chinese civilization. However, the paradox of history lies in that the hereditary system, which once propelled civilization and progress, ultimately turned to the opposite due to the corruption of power. Jie regarded himself as the Prince of Heaven, tricking the people's strength as a chip for wanton squandering. The grandeur of palaces stood in stark contrast to the people's wealth. When Tang of Shang led the allied forces of regional states to sound the clarion call at the Battle of Mingtiao Field, this dynastic change was not merely a shift in power, but a historical choice based on the people's will. The Shang Dynasty rose in the morning light of Bo capital, systematically engraving divination records on oracle bones to solidify the memory of civilization for the first time, and casting Ding and Dui vessels from bronze to display artistic attainments beyond its era through torty patterns. This inheritance and innovation of Xia culture were like a surging river, nourished by the source water while opening new channels. The fall of the Xia dynasty sounds a timeless warning in the annals of history. Once the balance of power deviates from the people's hearts, even the most glorious dynasty will eventually collapse. From the family-based rule of the Xia to the view of heaven's mandate of the Shang, Chinese civilization has been continuously tempered through successions. gradually clarifying the true meaning of governing. The people are the foundation of the state. When the solemn and grand sounds of ritual and music pierce through time, what we hear is not just the curtain call and rebirth of a dynasty, but the eternal echo from the depths of history. Only by following the people's hearts and marching with the times can we anchor our direction in the long river of civilization and sail toward a broader future.